In the case of Islam, you're talking about a much wider culture that has been insulated from modernity to a remarkable degree and has not had the same kinds of collisions with rationality or science or secular politics. And so on some level, it's like we're dealing with the Christians of the 14th century in many, many places, and even on the streets of London.
What would it take for the world that we live in to be a better world? Does religion get in the way of that? Take a look at this clip over here with Sam Harris talking to the Trigonometry podcast about that very idea. So we'll watch it together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
They're trying to replace Islamism with a more moderate version plus economic growth.
Yeah.
So that young men in particular have things to do and a purpose in life and a family to feed and all this other stuff, and are not drawn towards these sorts of ideologies. Well, you seem skeptical about that.
Yeah, because I think these religious commitments are sincere for many, many millions of people. And also, it's just for everyone. I mean, wealth is not enough on some level. I mean, this is many people think they need religion. I mean, you're certainly aware of this, and you're talking about this more. And I mean, you and I view this differently. I think the burden is on us to understand that the real depths of human flourishing need to be talked about in ways that are non-sectarian. I mean, the truth is non-sectarian. The truth is not Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or Jewish. So that's true of physics, and it's also true of the mind, right? Whatever's possible for us mentally and emotionally and socially, and whatever happens after death, and it's like to believe otherwise is to believe that one isolated community 2,000 years ago that had no access to science or even scientific values, much less scientific tools, got it perfectly right, and everyone else got it wrong, right? So one of these revealed texts is true, despite the fact that none of them seem to recognize that slavery was a problem morally, among other things. They know nothing about DNA or electricity or information science or the real scale of the cosmos or how disease spreads or anything, but they can tell you how to sacrifice a goat. And they've got some good wisdom in there too, but they don't have a monopoly on that because, you know, the Greeks had that and the Buddhists had that, and you know, the golden rule exists in many different contexts, and you know, even monkeys seem to intuit some basic version of it. When you treat them unfairly, or you reward one with a cucumber and another with a grape, they tend to not like that. Whatever's true about us spiritually and ethically is deeper than culture, and it's certainly deeper than any ancient culture. Right. And the fact that the world was partitioned by language barriers and geographical barriers for thousands of years, and everyone came up with different books, is an artifact that we have to recognize as an artifact. It's specious. It's spurious. It's not the actual foundation of our moral knowledge or anything else. And when you go into the Bible and read it and purport to find wisdom there, even if you're a fundamentalist, fundamentalists are picking and choosing the stuff they think is wise and the stuff they think is better left ignored. And they're doing that on the basis of a larger cultural conversation that is secular and that has moved on. So it's like the fact that you're still not trying to figure out whether you should kill somebody for working on the Sabbath if you're Jewish and reading the Pentateuch, or whether you really need to hunt witches in your community for the crime of witchcraft, right? But the fact that you can ignore all that and just take the so-called good stuff, again, that's an editing procedure that is the gold standard of that is your own moral intuitions that have been tuned up by your engagement with the 21st century, your inevitable engagement with the 21st century and a wider secular culture, right? So none of these religions have a monopoly on anything other than their own sectarian ignorance and tribalism and dogmatism. And all of that is best disavowed, and we can have a real conversation about the what is truly transcultural and deeper than the artifacts of whatever grandma had in her bag before we knew anything about biology or the human brain or etc. But most of the world doesn't see it that way. Most of the world is mightily attached to whatever they got at mother's knee about the unique sanctity of a specific book and what happens after death. And they've organized their lives around it. And in the case of Islam, you're talking about a much wider culture that has been insulated from modernity to a remarkable degree and has not had the same kinds of collisions with rationality or science or secular politics. And so on some level, it's like we're dealing with the Christians of the 14th century in many, many places, and even on the streets of London.
Sam, it's been an absolute pleasure as always having you on the show. The final question is always the same. What's the one thing we're not talking about that we really should be?
I think we're not talking about solving coordination problems that by definition are global in scale. So much of what we've talked about so far represents a massive opportunity cost around the problems that really are huge that we can't even think about solving. It's like, we haven't talked about AI, right? So AI is a global phenomenon now. It's going to impose whatever global risks it imposes on us to get out of this arms race condition and develop this technology sanely in a way that's going to be compatible with our flourishing or even our survival, is going to require cooperation that we just can't figure out how to even begin to engineer, right? How do we get the entire world on the same page around what is safe and ethical around
That's
AI?
not going to happen. That's not,
and so many other
happen.
problems. The next pandemic is another coordination problem that we're just but coordination problems are specifically interesting because we can fail to solve them even when everyone wants the same thing, right? Like it's not just people having different interests or seeing trade-offs differently. We can all fail together because we simply haven't figured out how to move collectively, even when everyone could be incentivized to do that, and everyone has the same basic interests.
I think there's a few important points here that need to be underscored in this discussion between Sam Harris and the guys from trigonometry. Number one is Sam Harris, who's a self-proclaimed atheist. He also endorses this idea that there are things in the human spirit that seek something beyond the natural world, that all the money and the food and the physical thrills that the world has to offer isn't enough to bring human satisfaction. There has to be something higher, something greater that every person is seeking after. The fact of the matter is that every human being seeks out meaning, seeks out purpose in this world, and seeks out things that are higher than this world. We seek out wisdom, we seek out transcendence, we seek out things that are not confined to the physical realm, which implies that there is a part within us, there's an aspect of us that transcends the physical world. Right? I have physical hunger, and that leads me to physical food, and that quenches the hunger that I feel inside of me. Same thing with physical thirst. There's a physical thirst, there's water to satiate that thirst, and the two go hand in hand. But what is it that satiates transcendence, that satiates meaning, that satiates wisdom, things that transcend the natural world? Well, there's an aspect of myself and of yourself that is transcendent, and only when we recognize that do we find fulfillment. Oftentimes, I believe what people like to do, and this is probably what leads many down the road of addiction, is we have this sort of spiritual thirst that can only be quenched with spiritual concepts, and yet instead we try to quench that spiritual void that we have with physical pleasures and sensations. And so there's only enough food only enough highs, only enough thrills, only enough things that you can get before you're just hungry again, because there's no amount of physical pleasures or physical sensations in the world that can fill a spiritual void. So that's number one. Certainly, the core of the human spirit needs something which is beyond what the physical world can give it. Secondly, as far as a moral system that transcends all religious mindset, well, that's actually something that's offered in Judaism. One of the unique things that I always found about Judaism was that it's not an our way or the highway sort of faith. Many other faiths out there say the only way that a person can live out what they're meant to in this world and achieve salvation in the next world is through our religious faith. Judaism doesn't believe that, never has, and never will. There is a specific set of instructions that are meant specifically for the Jewish people. The Jewish people were brought to be a nation of priests, a holy nation, and given specific requirements, specific responsibilities to uphold that, to achieve that. Certain foods you can and can't eat, to rest on the Sabbath, all sorts of various religious rituals that are meant to engage with and uplift the physical world. Things that have nothing to do with a code of morality. They're more things that are focused on bringing the spirit and will of God into the world. Certain things that the Jewish community specifically is charged with. However, there is an underlying form of morality, and we believe as Jews that this is the reason that so many religious faiths across the world believe many of the same foundations, moral foundations, is because we all come from Adam and Eve, and there was an already established system of morality that was in place in the beginning of creation. And although people have scattered and have come up with their own religions and traditions and whatnot, at the center of all of them, or at the center of at least most of them, are the remnants of this sort of biblical model of morality. So like all good world religions will say that murder is wrong. All good world religions will say that stealing is wrong. All good world religions will say that certain forms of sexual immorality are wrong. These are things that across the board there are certain things that just line up. And we believe as Jews that this is the reason for this is because Adam and Eve were given a code of law. We find evidence for this in the biblical model. In the book of Genesis, before the law was given at Sinai, Cain is punished for killing his brother Abel, who told him that that was wrong. The generation of the flood, which again was before Sinai, they were punished for their evil activities. We find various instances before Sinai. We find Sodom and Gomorrah. We find the Tower of Babel. We find all sorts of instances before the law is given at Sinai where a moral code is broken. And the implication is that that moral code was known and given, because you can't be responsible for something if there was never a moral code laid out. And so these basic forms of morality that typically world religion, good religion, ancient religion agree with are these what we would call natural law. In rabbinic tradition, they're called the Noahide laws, meaning that they were the code that was given at the beginning of creation and then reestablished after Noah's flood. That's why they have the name Noahide. But the idea is that they are called by natural law. And a world that lives according to this natural law system that God embedded and made to create a civilized world, if we live up to those, we live a wonderful, good, and godly life altogether. We don't need to have everybody on the same page in religion in order that the world be a great place to live. Everyone can adhere to their own forms of religious traditions and perspectives and whatnot, and yet maintain what it means to live in a society that undergirds the foundations of morality. So I would agree with some of what Sam Harris says over here. I would disagree with some of it, but certainly encourage everyone to live according to this basic moral code, which undergirds civilization. The more we do that, the better world we live in. If you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.